My mother was dying, and my wife was doing her makeup. I remember standing in the hallway, my phone shaking in my hand, my mother's voice on the other end weak and scared. "Patrick, my chest. It hurts so bad. My arm is numb." Those words hit me like a truck. My 82-year-old mother, alone in her house, having a heart attack, and I had no way to get to her. My truck was in the shop. The only car in our driveway belonged to my wife, Yasmin. I ran to our bedroom, my heart pounding faster than it ever had in my life. Yasmin was standing in front of the mirror, curling her hair, getting ready for her dinner with friends. I begged her. I actually got down on my knees and begged her to let me use her car. She looked at me like I had asked her for something crazy. She rolled her eyes, turned back to the mirror, and said the words that changed everything. "That's not my problem, Patrick. Figure it out yourself." Then she walked into the bathroom and shut the door. I heard the shower turn on. My mother was having a heart attack, and my wife chose her hair over her life. I stood there frozen for a second, feeling like the floor had disappeared under me. What kind of person does that? What kind of person hears heart attack and 82 years old and still says no? I didn't have time to think about it. My mother needed me. But would I make it to her in time? Would she even still be breathing when I got there? Before we continue, let us know in the comments section where in the world you're tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories reach. And if this story speaks to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. My name is Patrick Moses. I'm 44 years old, and until that night, I thought I understood my marriage. I thought I understood my wife. I was wrong about both. Let me back up a little, so you understand how we got to that terrible moment. I grew up with just my mom, Carrie. My father passed away when I was 9, and my mother raised me all by herself. She worked 2 jobs some years just to keep food on the table and keep me in decent shoes. She never complained. She never made me feel like we were struggling, even though we were. Everything I am today, every ounce of hard work in me, came from watching her. When I got older, I promised myself I would take care of her the way she took care of me. And I did. Every week I called her. Every Sunday we had dinner together. When her health started slowing down a few years ago, I checked on her almost every day. I met Yasmin about 6 years ago at a friend's wedding. She was beautiful, confident, and funny. She made me laugh in a way nobody had in a long time. We got married a year later. In the beginning, things were good. But slowly, I started noticing things. Little things at first. Yasmin didn't like spending time with my mother. She always had an excuse. She was tired. She had plans. She had a headache. At first, I told myself it was just because they were still getting to know each other. But as the years went on, the excuses never stopped. If anything, they got worse. My mother never said anything bad about Yasmin. Not once. She's not that kind of woman. But I could see it in her eyes sometimes. A little bit of hurt, a little bit of loneliness. My mother wanted a daughter-in-law who felt like family. Instead, she got someone who barely looked at her when we visited. I brought it up to Yasmin a few times over the years. She always brushed it off. "I'm just busy, Patrick. Don't make it a bigger deal than it is." So I let it go. I told myself that as long as I kept showing up for my mother, it didn't matter what Yasmin did or didn't do. That night started like any normal Thursday. I had just gotten home from work. My truck was still at the shop getting new brakes, so my coworker Ezekiel had dropped me off. Yasmin was already home, getting ready for dinner with her friends Jeremy and a few others from her book club. She looked happy, humming to herself as she picked out an outfit. I remember feeling grateful that she had her own life, her own friends. I never wanted to hold her back from anything. I just wanted the same kind of support in return, especially when it came to my mother. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when my phone rang. It was my mother's number. I almost didn't think anything of it. She called me all the time just to talk. but something about the time of night felt off. I answered with a smile on my face. "Hey, Mom, what's—" Her voice cut me off. And it wasn't her normal voice. It was shaky, breathless, scared. "Patrick, something's wrong. My chest feels tight. It hurts really bad. My left arm feels numb. My stomach dropped. I have watched enough medical shows and heard enough stories to know exactly what those symptoms meant. My mother, alone in her house across town, was having a heart attack. Mom, stay calm, I'm coming right now. Do not hang up the phone." I grabbed my keys out of habit before remembering my truck wasn't even in the driveway. Panic hit me harder than it ever had. I had no car. My phone was still pressed to my ear, my mother's breathing getting shorter and shorter on the other end. That's when I ran to find Yasmin, praying she would understand, praying she would grab her keys and help me save my mother's life. I never imagined that the woman I married, the woman who promised to stand beside me through everything, would turn her back on me in the one moment I needed her the most. But she did, and what happened next would change our marriage, our family, and both of our lives forever. I stood outside that bathroom door, banging on it with my fist, begging Yasmin to come out. The shower kept running, like nothing in the world was wrong. Like my mother wasn't fighting for her life, on the other end of my phone. "Yasmin, please, this is an emergency. I need your car." Nothing. Just water running and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I looked down at my phone. My mother's breathing sounded worse. "Mom, hang on, I'm coming, I promise," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, even though inside I was falling apart. I didn't have time to keep begging Yasmin. I ran out of the house, my mind racing, trying to think of anyone who could help. That's when I thought of Royce. Royce had lived next door to us for almost 5 years. He was an older man, retired, always out in his yard fixing something or waving hello when I got home from work. We weren't just neighbors, we were friends. He had helped me move furniture before, watched our house when we traveled, even brought soup over once when I was sick. Royce was the kind of man who showed up when it mattered. I ran across the yard so fast I almost tripped over my own feet. I banged on his door, my phone still pressed to my ear, my mother's voice growing weaker. Royce opened the door in his house slippers, confused for half a second before he saw the look on my face. "Patrick, what's wrong?" "It's my mom. She's having a heart attack. My truck's in the shop and Yasmin won't—" "I need a ride, Royce, please." I didn't even have to finish the sentence. Royce grabbed his keys off the hook by the door and was moving before I even stepped back. "Get in the car, son. Talk to your mother. I'll drive." I have never been more thankful for another human being in my life. We sped through the streets, every red light feeling like it lasted an hour. I stayed on the phone with my mother the whole time, telling her to breathe slow, telling her I was coming, telling her to stay awake. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone steady. When we got to her house, I ran inside and found her sitting on the kitchen floor, her back against the cabinet, her face pale and covered in sweat. Seeing her like that, so small and so scared, broke something inside me. "Mom, I'm here, I said, kneeling beside her. Royce called 911 while I held my mother's hand. The ambulance felt like it took forever, but really, it was only about 10 minutes. When the paramedics got there, they moved fast, checking her heart rate, giving her oxygen, asking her questions. I rode with her in the ambulance while Royce followed behind in his car so I wouldn't be stranded at the hospital. At the hospital, the doctors took her straight back. I sat in the waiting room with Royce beside me, my leg bouncing, my hands still shaking. I called Yasmin 3 times. She didn't answer once. After what felt like the longest hour of my life, a doctor came out and told me my mother had suffered a mild cardiac event. Her heart had been under serious stress, but they caught it in time. If she had waited much longer, if help had come even 20 or 30 minutes later, things could have ended very differently. I felt relief wash over me so strong I almost cried right there in the hallway. But underneath that relief was something else. Anger. A deep, burning anger at the fact that my wife had a chance to help save my mother's life, and she chose her hair and her dinner plans instead. Royce stayed with me the entire night. He didn't complain once, even though it was almost 2 in the morning by the time they moved my mother to a regular room. He brought me coffee from the vending machine and sat quietly beside me while I stared at the wall, replaying everything in my head. "You're a good son, Patrick," he said at one point. "Your mother's lucky to have you." I nodded, but inside, I kept thinking about how differently things could have gone if not for Royce. A neighbor, not even family. He had shown up faster and with more love than my own wife. Around 3 in the morning, I finally got a text from Yasmin. "Sorry, missed your calls. Dinner ran late. Everything okay?" Everything okay. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't turned her back on a dying woman because of a shower and a dinner reservation. I didn't respond that night. I couldn't. I sat there next to my mother's hospital bed, watching her sleep peacefully with tubes and wires connected to her, and I felt something shift inside me. Something that had been building for years, quiet and unnoticed, finally rising to the surface. The next morning, my mother woke up looking much better. Her color had returned, and she even managed a small smile when she saw me sitting beside her bed. "You didn't have to stay all night, baby," she said softly. "Of course I did, Mom. Where else would I be?" She reached out and squeezed my hand. "Where's Yasmin?" I hesitated. I didn't want to upset her, not while she was still recovering. But my mother has always been sharp, even at 82. She could read my face like a book. "She was busy last night," I said carefully. My mother's eyes studied mine for a long moment. She didn't say anything right away. She just nodded slowly, like she already understood more than I was telling her. Later that morning, while I stepped out to grab us both something to eat, my mother asked the nurse for something that surprised me when I found out about it. She asked for a phone, and she asked the nurse to help her look up the number for her attorney, a man named Milgram who had handled her affairs for over 15 years. I didn't know about the call until much later. If I had been in the room, I might have told her to wait, to think it through, to not make big decisions right after something so scary. But my mother has never been a woman who waits when her mind is made up. By the time I came back to the room with breakfast, she was hanging up the phone, a calm, quiet look on her face. Almost peaceful. "Who was that, Mom?" She looked at me, and there was something different in her eyes, something final. "That was Milgram, honey. I asked him to come by this afternoon. There's something I need to take care of." I had no idea what she meant, not yet. I had no idea that by the end of that day, everything about our family, our money, and my marriage would be changed forever. I didn't think much of it at first when my mother said Milgram was coming by. She had used him for small things before, updating some paperwork, checking on her house documents. I figured this was just another one of those things, something to keep her mind busy while she recovered. I was wrong. Milgram arrived that afternoon in a gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He greeted me with a polite handshake and then asked if he could have some private time with my mother. I stepped out into the hallway, gave them their space, and sat in one of those uncomfortable hospital chairs, scrolling through my phone, still ignoring the messages from Yasmin that kept popping up. "Can we talk when you get home? I'm sorry about last night. Please answer me, Patrick." I didn't respond to any of them. I wasn't ready. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother sitting on that kitchen floor, pale and struggling to breathe, while my wife stood in front of a mirror curling her hair. About 45 minutes later, Milgram stepped out of the room and gave me a small nod before heading toward the elevator. When I walked back in, My mother was sitting up a little straighter, looking more like herself than she had in 2 days. "Everything okay, Mom?" "Everything is exactly how it should be," she said, and there was a strength in her voice that hadn't been there before. I didn't ask more questions. Part of me had a feeling about what had happened, but I wasn't ready to face it yet. I just wanted my mother to rest and get better. That was all that mattered to me in that moment. 2 days later, my mother was discharged from the hospital. The doctors said she needed rest, but her heart was stable and she was expected to make a full recovery. I drove her home in a rental car I had picked up that morning, and Royce met us there, insisting on bringing over a pot of his famous chicken soup. "You saved her life," I told him, my voice cracking a little. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Royce just smiled and patted my shoulder. "You don't owe me anything, son. That's what neighbors, what friends are supposed to do." Those words stuck with me. That's what people who love you are supposed to do. Not disappear behind a shower door when your world is falling apart. That evening, I finally went home. Yasmin was sitting on the couch when I walked in, and she stood up quickly, her eyes red like she had been crying. "Patrick, I'm so sorry." I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I thought, "You thought your dinner plans were more important than my mother's life," I said quietly. I wasn't yelling. I didn't have the energy to yell. I was just tired. Tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. "That's not fair," she said. "I didn't know it was that serious." "I told you she was having a heart attack, Yasmin. I got down on my knees and begged you. You told me to figure it out myself and got in the shower." She didn't have an answer for that. She just stood there, arms crossed, looking at the floor. I didn't say anything else that night. I went to check on my mother, who was staying with us for a few days, so I could keep an eye on her recovery. And I made sure she was comfortable before finally getting some sleep myself. Over the next week, things between Yasmin and me stayed cold and distant. She tried a few more times to apologize, but the words felt empty to me. Sorry didn't change what had happened. Sorry didn't erase the image of my mother, struggling to breathe on that kitchen floor, while my wife worried about being late to dinner. About 10 days after my mother came home, an envelope arrived in the mail addressed to Yasmin. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard her open it in the living room. Then I heard her gasp. What is this?" I walked in to find her standing there, the papers shaking in her hands, her face pale white. "Patrick, did you know about this?" I took the papers from her and looked them over. It was a copy of my mother's updated will, the one Milgram had helped her write from her hospital bed. My mother had left everything, her house, her savings, the small collection of jewelry that had been passed down from her own mother, to me. Yasmin's name, which had been included in the old version of the will years ago, was completely removed. Not $1, not one item, nothing was left to her. "She can't do this," Yasmin said, her voice rising with panic. "This isn't fair." "She can do whatever she wants with her own things, Yasmin. It's her life, her money, her choice." "But I'm your wife." "You were supposed to act like it," I said. "When it mattered most, you didn't." Yasmin broke down crying, saying she was sorry, saying she would do anything to fix things, saying she loved my mother, even though her actions had shown something completely different. I stood there and listened, but something inside me had already made a decision. It wasn't really about the will. It was about everything the will represented. Years of my mother feeling unwelcome, years of excuses, and finally, the one night that mattered most, the night my mother's life was in danger, and Yasmin chose herself. That night, after Yasmin finally went to bed, exhausted from crying, I sat in the living room and thought about my whole marriage. I thought about all the times I made excuses for her, all the times I told myself it would get better, all the times I put my mother's feelings aside to keep peace at home. I realized peace built on ignoring pain isn't really peace at all. The next morning, I started packing my things. Yasmin came downstairs and found me folding clothes into a suitcase, and her face went from confused to desperate in seconds. "Patrick, what are you doing?" "I'm leaving, Yasmin." "Because of the will? Because of money?" "No," I said, zipping up my bag. "Because of who you showed me you are. Money and inheritance. That's not what this is about. It's about the fact that my mother almost died, and you couldn't be bothered to care. I can't build a life with someone who doesn't have room in her heart for the people I love most." She tried everything that morning. She cried, she begged, she promised to change. But some things, once you see them clearly, you can't unsee. I had spent years excusing behavior that I should have addressed a long time ago. My mother's heart attack didn't create the problem. It just finally showed it to me in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. I moved into my mother's house temporarily while I figured out my next steps. Being there, cooking breakfast with her in the mornings, sitting on her porch in the evenings listening to her stories, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace. The kind that comes from being around people who show up for you, who value you, who love you without conditions. Royce became even more than a neighbor to me during that time. He was proof that family isn't always about blood or marriage. Sometimes it's about who shows up when it matters most. My mother made a full recovery over the following months. She started gardening again, something she loved but hadn't done in years. Every Sunday, we still had our dinner together, just the two of us. And sometimes Royce would join us, bringing something delicious he had cooked. I never went back to Yasmin. The divorce was finalized about 8 months later. It was hard, but it was also the clearest decision I ever made. Looking back, I learned something important through all of this. Love isn't about the good times only. It's about who stands beside you during the scary, hard, middle-of-the-night moments. It's about who drops everything to help and who doesn't. My mother always used to tell me, kindness is never wasted, even when it feels small. Royce showed me that kindness that night, and it changed my life. My wife showed me the opposite, and it changed my life too, just in a very different way. I choose to surround myself now with people who show up, people who care, people who understand that love means action, not just words. And every single day, I'm grateful I learned that lesson in time to build a life full of real peace, real family, and real love.